Brett Pontecorvo here, and today we are going to be talking about the Super Saw. And the Super Saw is in almost every song. It's everywhere. It's in pop music, it's in worship music, it's in dance music, it's a bass line, it's hits, it's pads. And so it's really important to be able to make this, and you can do it in any synth that you have. Today I'm going to be demonstrating how to do it inside Ableton's analog, but if you're working with literally any other synth, all of the steps will be very similar. Before we dive in, take a second to like and subscribe to my YouTube channel to stay up to date with all of the latest happenings. All right, let's check it out. So this is what my Super Saw sounded like. Or perhaps you're more familiar with so really common sound, and I built this really just using analog and reverb and a compressor. So let's start over. I'm going to delete this. It is gone, and I'm going to add in from my instruments analog. So this is the default sound. And what's nice is when you open analog, you'll see there are already two saws here. So the reason it's called a super saw is because it's comprised entirely of detuned and out of phase saw waves. So first thing that we need to do when we get in here is think about how our signal is routed. So right now we have two waves, and they're going through, both of them, filter one out of amp one out of the end. But we really want our super saw to be complex and interesting sounding and rich so that it doesn't end up being kind of flat. So I'm going to go ahead here and turn my filter 2 and amp 2 on. And I'm going to send half of the signal, 50-50, from each oscillator. So that now if I turn off amp 1 or turn off amp 2, you're still hearing signal, which is important. Okay. So the thing that makes super saws kind of get their unique sound, like I mentioned, is the detuning. So we're going to start by detuning slightly each oscillator. So I'm going to bring this down just a touch. So you can already hear there's a major difference there, and I'm going to bring this up just a touch. Already a very interesting sound. Now, I like to have a super saw that contains lots of different octaves. So I'm going to bring oscillator 2 one octave up. And here in oscillator 1, over by subsync, I'm going to add some sub. So as I bring the level up, you'll hear it sort of brings in that deeper octave. All right, so let's keep moving down the line here. To get that unique sort of punch that you get at the beginning, we're going to use a filter. So I am selecting the 24 dB bandpass filter, low pass filter rather. It's a little bit more extreme. So we're going to get that punchy sound by adjusting the attack on the filter. So I'm going to make this really extreme so you can kind of hear what I'm talking about. I'm going to turn off oscillator 2 and amp 2 so you can just hear what happens with this filter. So you hear it's sort of taking out that high-end energy. And what we're going to do is we're going to slowly open the filter. So I'm going to make this pretty extreme, like I said, so you can hear what's happening over a longer period of time. So you can kind of hear that meow. It's a little more extreme if you turn up the resonance. So we want that to happen, but we want it to happen really fast. So I'm going to move this attack to about 400 milliseconds. 300 is a little bit better, and I'm going to open this. And you'll want to make sure that the envelope here is set all the way up so that it's affected. Because if this is at 0, no effect. Sweet. All right, so let's turn on oscillator 2 now and go into our filter, and we're going to do the same thing. So our attack was about 300. And that's giving us that punch that we wouldn't have otherwise, right? If I remove these envelopes, we lose our punch. As soon as I bring them back in, we get our punch. Now, I'm gonna bring this down a bit. Oh yeah, sounding good. Now, so the next thing that I want to do is I actually want the filter, after it swings open, to come back a bit. So we've got our attack here, and I'm gonna bring our decay time to be a little bit faster and our sustain time up. So if I made that really extreme, so you can hear what's happening. You hear it jump down to that really low level, but we want it to sort of have a high peak and then drop down. So put our sustain back up, maybe at, 60. And I'll do the same here. So we're getting there, but it's pretty the same. On both sides, you're getting the same information. So when I hit a note, you can see there's a bit of volume change, which is happening because of the phase cancellation, but there's not really different things going on. And when your ears are getting hit at different sides and things are changing, that is a sound that people want to listen to, that they're going to get cued into, that they're going to be like, what's happening there? So we're going to move over to this amp section, and I'm just going to pan oscillator 1 out slightly to the left and oscillator 2 slightly out to the right. So again, when it was here, straightforward, but as I move them out, you hear it sort of going to the sides. All right, so we've got a pretty interesting sound. Our next thing that we need to do is we want to create some slow change over time. And the way that we're going to do that is by adding a little bit of LFO modulation to the pitch. So if we go ahead and bring our LFO rate down to about 3 and head over here to oscillator 1, we're going to just add a touch of LFO. And a little bit goes a long way here, right? When I moved it here, it was crazy. We don't want that. 0.02. All right, and we're going to do the same for LFO2, but we're going to do a different rate. So this guy's at 0.4. Let's do this at 0.5, and let's add a bit. Sweet. Now in our amp, I want to add just a touch more attack. And bring our release down. Sweet. Okay, now we've used the LFO to modulate our pitch. We're actually going to do it to modulate our panning slightly as well. So LFO1 will modulate the panning slightly here, and LFO2 will modulate it slightly here. not terrible. We're going to add some Unison. Basically what Unison does is it takes what you're doing and it copies it and it detunes them. So the more detuned, the more interesting sound you get because you're getting some phase cancellation and it's causing it to kind of wow, that sound that you get if you've ever tuned a guitar using guitar harmonics. So we're going to add a little bit of that and it's going to add some depth. So I've turned on my Unison, and I'm going to just add 4 voices. And as I bring up this detune, you're going to hear it sort of spread out. So here's my chord. I'm going to increase the voices here because all right, now I've added that, so our sustain on our amps is actually a little bit jarring. So I'm going to bring them up. All right, now we're getting somewhere. So we've created a pretty big sound, but there are actually 2 audio effects that I love to throw on the end of my supersaws to just kind of give it a little bit more character. So the first is reverb. And I've got a reverb preset that I really like to use. So I'm going to start there. But our decay time's pretty high, so I'm going to pull that down. And I want to turn our pre-delay up because pre-delay tells you how long it's going to take before the reverb kicks in. So we still want that punch to pass through before it gets watered down. So when our pre-delay is down here, the verb starts immediately. If I turn it all the way up, it almost sounds a little echoey. So somewhere in the middle here is going to give us that punch, but also that tail. And I'm getting some clipping here, so I'm just going to pull this volume back. All right, I'm happy with that. So it just adds a bit of tail. That we didn't have before. Now to bring that out, what we're going to do is we are going to add a glue compressor. And the reason that we're going to use the glue compressor is because glue compressor is not a clean sound. It adds a little bit of character, but it still is going to give us that compression effect. And so when it gets hit with a lot of volume, it's going to give us a little bit more sustain. When it gets hit with less volume, it's going to give us less sustain. And so in a way, when you're using this as a keyboard player in a live context, it allows you to play the compressor. It's sort of part of the instrument. So I'm going to put this attack at 0.1, ratio all the way up, and I'm going to put this at 1.2, and I'm just going to start pulling the threshold back. Turn on soft clipping. So you can already hear my single notes sort of slip underneath. But those larger sounding chords are hitting the compressor a lot harder, and so it's getting us this sustain. You're hearing more of the character of that reverb. And now I just want to add back the volume that I took away. So my sounds that are a little bit lighter, will pass right underneath, and my sounds that are stronger will get that extra benefit of having the glue compressor color the reverb slightly. Now, to finish off your patch, you're going to want to group these. So I'm going to select them all and hit Command G. That's going to put them in an instrument rack. Now, the benefit of this is it will give you macros to control some things that you might want to use. Now, I consider these 3 items here part of the patch. So I'm not going to use those to alter my sound, but I will do is I will go ahead and add an auto filter right here, and I'm going to map this frequency to macro 1 so that if I need to, I can pull this down and I have a pad from that filter. And then I can also drop a reverb on here and add dry wet to macro 2. So if I want to add a little bit of reverb to my filtered down pad sound, I can just bring that in. And of course, when you open it all the way up, you've got your super saw sound. That is all for today. That's how you make a super saw sound. Make sure that you like and subscribe so you are up to date with all the latest content. Connect with me at my website. Depending on when you're watching this video, that will either be mainstagetoableton.com or after August 4th, 2019, LiveKeyboardist.com. Looking forward to seeing you there.